Welcome to the newest edition of the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. I am John Schmeelk, thrilled to welcome to the program senior NFL reporter at Yahoo Sports, Jori Epstein. Jori, how are you?
I'm great, John. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Just to timestamp this, it's airing on Thursday of the week before the season begins, but we're recording this a week prior. So if something big happens, and usually that's not a good thing, so we're hoping that does not happen between now and then, that's why we didn't talk about it. So we're going to try to keep things at a 20,000-foot view here. This is really the Giants' last, competitive practice of camp, really, today, right? They play their last preseason game in 2 days, and then next week, you're kind of ramping up, but you're not really going at it. Your roster's limited again. What were your major takeaways just from kind of watching practice today and being around the team?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everyone wants to talk about Russ and talk about Jackson Dart, and I think it seems that Russ does really have a stronghold on that first-team offense, and he knows where he's going. I mean, it seemed like a lot of today was, okay, let's work with red zone, keep our legs fresh for the upcoming game, and okay, let's see what we can do with just handoffs and pitches and all of that. But I was impressed with what we saw from Jackson Dart today. I mean, I don't think it was unlike what we've seen in the preseason games, which is that when he gets in there, he's able to operate it cleanly, and you do not always see that from rookies.
No, absolutely. And I've been here since 2007, so I was here for 80% of Eli Manning's career. And he was more of a lead-by-example type, right? The impact Russ has had on this building, to me, has honestly been shocking. I did not think the type of impact one player could have like he has had was frankly possible in my long years covering the league. But from talking to the people in charge here, the players, did you get the sense being here, the type of impact Russ has had on the organization?
Yeah, I would say that Russ's impact is clear both to the players and also to the coaches in the front office. I mean, I think around the clock what we're seeing that, and it's funny because you talk about your career here at the Giants. My first 7 years of my career were Dak's rookie year until his 7th year of his career, and he did have that leadership, and he's got leadership in spades, and I think that no one debates that, even if they debate where he is exactly in the quarterback pecking line. And so I think when I look at this, I say, well, I know what it's like when a quarterback is talking to the defensive players and getting these guys and inviting them over for this and all of those different things. And I would say that we're seeing that from Russ on and off the field. And I also think from a culture standpoint, we're seeing that from Jameis Winston. Yep. And that might have been the most surprising thing to me, only coming out for 1 day of camp, is how many people were talking about Jameis's impact, whether that's Jackson Dart talking about the ways he's developing him, or the team talking about the way that, oh, it's the yoga that assistant general manager Brandon Brown is talking to us about. I mean, all around the clock.
Yeah, Brandon Brown basically saying, yeah, we are not interested in trading Jameis Winston. Like, we love him here and kind of what he brings to the team. And I think the interesting thing with Wilson, and people in the front office has told me this, the confidence that having a guy that the players, a lot of these guys, frankly, when they were like in high school,
correct,
saw win a Super Bowl, go to a Super Bowl, has potential to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. Just the level of confidence, the way like the tide has risen, which I think was given how the last 10 years have gone here.
Right.
I think it's really needed, and I think it will help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is a team and a quarterback that's getting married at the right time. I mean, I think Russell Wilson and the Giants are just a really good fit for right now. And I also think you say, okay, he's going to show you how to prepare. He's going to show Jackson Dart what you want your career to look like down the line and how you get to that far in your career and still have a job in the NFL. And then, oh, by the way, he's still got that moon ball and he's still got the 80-yard pass. And I mean, it's not only off the field. I think Russ still has something left in the tank on the field.
Yeah, and look, obviously, if he comes out and he plays poorly, none of that other stuff's really going to matter, right? And I think his connection with Malik Neighbors is going to be really huge. He was back on the practice field today after missing a couple weeks. They've kind of slowly tried to manage him this offseason, ramp him up. How big of a year do you think Malik Neighbors can have?
Yeah, I think it's huge, and I think the biggest thing is when I think about what Russell Wilson will do with this offense, the moonball is his number one thing. I think what you want to do if you're the Giants is establish a run game that requires defenses to respect the run game so that you can lighten up a little bit of the coverage further down the field. And if you do that, well, then Russ and Malik Neighbors should have a very complementary skill set. Yeah,
you want to make this look like what Russell Wilson's best years look like in Seattle, right? Where, the old thing, let Russ cook. Well, that didn't work out that well. It turns out that Pete Carroll actually knew what he was doing. And if you use the run game and then you have Russ complement that, that's how you're probably going to get the best out of him.
Absolutely. And I think generally you see this around the league is that if you want those explosives, you need the run game to complement it. And so I think this team realizes that that is where you can most have success.
You mentioned Jackson Dart a couple of times. What do you think the developmental cycle is going to look like? The fans are probably going to see Jackson Dart play real football for the last time in that third preseason game. And then who knows when any of us, including me, are going to see him do anything, let alone in a game, but even like in practice, right? So how do you think they're going to go about this, and how do you think they're going to know when he's ready?
Yeah, I think the Giants want to understand how many data points can we get before week 1 of the regular season? How many data points can you get where, he has no idea he's going in the game. Most of the coaches didn't even know, but Brian Daboll's throwing him in there with the ones all of a sudden just to see what happens. And it's funny, I was talking to Jackson about this, and he said, he said, are you serious to Dave's? Because he goes, Dave's does things that are sometimes kind of joking. And I didn't know if this was one of the joking ones or one of the serious ones. Like, which one was I supposed to do? So he wasn't saying, are you serious in terms of what do you mean you want me to come in? It was, I legitimately don't know if you're making a joke and how I'm supposed to respond to this. And I just think when you look at what he did there, what he did in different parts of the game, I think that they are continuing to ramp up what's asked of him. And another thing that really interested me when I talked to Jackson was this idea of, he told me that he has a lot of freedom at the line of scrimmage. Now, not him at the exclusion of the other quarterbacks, and I'm not around every day, so I haven't seen that in practice, but I was surprised at him being like, yeah, they are giving the quarterbacks the keys to this offense, that if we see something the defense is doing, we have the ability to change the play at the line of scrimmage. Yeah,
and that goes to the complicated nature of Brian Daboll's offense. I mean, I had players come in here that were 10-year veterans and be like, John, this is a lot. Like, there's a lot of verbiage, there's a lot of things in it. Jackson does not seem overwhelmed by it, which is, I think, is probably the most encouraging thing.
He doesn't seem overwhelmed, but he does say in his words that he's humbled by it, not by the offense, but by being in a room trying to learn this offense with Russell Wilson, who's won a Super Bowl, Jameis Winston, who's been in this league as a first-round pick for a while, and Tommy DeVito, who's actually got the most experience in this offense and may know the offense better than any of them.
It's true. Talking to Jackson, were you just... You feel like his personality was built from scratch just to play quarterback in the National Football League, doesn't it? Like, he's just like Captain Charisma. It's just fun talking to him, you know?
Yeah, when I was waiting to talk to him before we started talking, someone's walking by and their kid's with them, and he's asking the kid about, well, what's your name? And, you got that blue raspberry shaved ice here? And, I mean, he's making friends with everyone in conversation, and this was not someone he was asked to go meet. He's just kind of doing that. It seems like that's pretty much across the board. Or, I'm mentioning where I'm from, and he's like, I've got high school friends there, and I mean, all along.
Yeah, it's fun. And it's funny, we talked about how Russell Wilson had his best success in Seattle. And I think they also want to build this team around the defense, right? That's where a lot of their investment came in the offseason, whether it was Javon Howard and Paulson Adebo as free agent signings, Chauncey Golston as well, Abdul Carter as the 3rd overall pick. How do you think this defense is being built, and what do you think it might look like when we hit the field in week 1?
Yeah, I mean, what we hear from Brandon Brown, and this echoes what the Giants have been saying, is this rushing coverage. That's how you want to build it. Yeah. I have questions about the coverage, and I think the question to me is also, how is your run defense going to look? Because if your run defense isn't strong, your pass rushers usually don't have the opportunity to go make money.
And Brian Daboll has talked to us about this. You can't rush the passer if, to your point, you're giving up 5-6 yards on first down, because then, it's 2nd and 4 and teams can do whatever they want. But also if you don't have leads, like if you're down 13 points in the second quarter, well, guess what? You're never putting your opponent into a position where you can get all your pass rushers on the field, do all these crazy blitzes, because they're under no pressure of like, all right, well, we have to get a first down here. They're happy to just check it down if they have to, because they're up couple scores.
No, absolutely. I think you see that the pass rushers are going to close out the game. They're not going to be able to win the game from the start.
Bingo, absolutely. What do you think of what you saw from Abdul Carter and what you've heard from people about Abdul Carter in the building?
Yeah, I think they're excited about him. I think when you look at both him and Malik Neighbors, I think that this team feels like you don't want to be picking as highly as they are, but if you're going to, you want to get talents like that.
Get those guys, right? And that can be difference makers. And I think when you look at this defense, if you combine Carter, we know what Brian Burns is, and he's really accepted a leadership role this year. And then Dexter Lawrence, who really hasn't done a ton yet in the summer, but he'll be ready for week 1. This, again, if the other parts come together, could be one of the better defensive lines in football.
The talent is there, and I think, as we mentioned, the question is just what's the offense going to be doing, what's the back end going to be doing, and is this talent going to be able to show what they have?
Yeah, very young secondary, which always, does it come together? We'll have to see how that goes. The Giants Foundation will host a 5K racing kids run presented by Quest on Sunday, October 26th at 9 a.m. at MetLife Stadium. Net proceeds will benefit the Giants Foundation. All participants will receive a commemorative t-shirt. After the race, stay for a post-race festival with appearances by Giants legends and a live DJ. Register now at giants.com/5K. The Giants Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation.
Huddle up, get in here. If you're lined up here, you gotta go over the middle with it to score.
Right. How do we make that happen?
I don't know.
But Citizens does.
Make sense of your money with Citizens, official bank of Eli Manning.
All right, let's go wider NFL here. You've been to 18 camps, you told me?
This is 16 tomorrow. By the time people are watching this, 17.
Very good. So let's start with the NFC East first. We've given this stat a bajillion times in our programming. You have not had consecutive NFC East champions since 2004, when Andy Reid with Donovan McNabb was, coaching and quarterback in the Philadelphia Eagles. Is that finally going to get broken this year?
I'm actually glad you remind me of this, because on all accounts, on paper, the Eagles seem like the best team, and I do think they're the best team in this division.
I have a hard time making an argument against them.
But I also have a hard time making an argument that someone's going to repeat in the NFC East, because why should we keep making this argument? We've been doing it every year. I mean, again, this is my 10th season covering the NFC East. In large part, I'm covering the whole league now, but starting in Dallas, now living in New York, being with Philly a lot. And every year we think it's going to happen, so why is this the year?
I know, but... what team? How about this? Which team in the division do you think has the best chance of breaking that streak? It's a great question.
I mean, you want to say the Commanders when you see what they did in the NFC title game last year. I still think that the Eagles are a more complete team, I should say, than the Commanders. I think that the Commanders will be a better team than last year, but I don't think they'll have a better record, because the NFC East schedule is a lot tougher this year. Oh,
it's impossible. And, we kind of talked about with the Giants, and we'll get back to the rest of the division. The Giants could be a significantly better team this year.
Yeah.
And I was joking with fans like 2 months ago. I'm like, can I get you excited about a better point differerential and better DVOA? Like, does that get you excited? Because that might be what we're looking at, where you see the progress in those areas, even if, the record maybe, 2 or 3 more wins. It's just so difficult. It might not show up in the win-loss column.
No, absolutely. I visited all 4 NFC North teams, and I think they all kind of realized, like, hey, when you look at their opponents last year and you look at something that's going on, you're probably not all going to win 15 games this year.
Yeah, you get the Giants and everybody in the NFC East gets the NFC North and the AFC West.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. You don't have one easy game in the 8 against those two, not to mention the teams in the NFC East. What are your concern levels about the Commanders' defense? Because I feel like their secondary,
right?
There's some older guys, whether it's Bobby Wagner, Marshawn Lattimore. I don't know what's going on at safety there necessarily. They don't have that A-plus pass rusher up front. How do you think Dan Quinn's going to try to put that unit together, which really in the end is the reason they did not beat the Philadelphia Eagles, right? They just couldn't get a stop in that game.
Right. I think the question for them on defense is, I don't think they believe that in their first year they had the talent fits to run the scheme they wanted. I think that they wanted corners that were a little bit longer. I think there were some personnel elements that's like, hey, you can't completely turn over the cupboard in 1 year.
Sure.
I think they believe they have personnel that better fits the type of defense they want to play, with Joe Wood Jr. calling the defense as the coordinator. Now the question is, can you do it? They do have some guys like a Frankie Louvu, like a Mikey Stainer, so like they had some bright spots. They got Von Miller in-house. It'll be interesting to see how much he has left in the tank, and also, quite frankly, what do they ask him to do? Are they asking him to play on first and second downs? All of that. And so I think they have the pieces to be better, but we need to see it before we can believe it.
We're here in the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better with Jori Epstein, senior NFL reporter for Yahoo Sports. Dallas Cowboys. I'm sure you still have ties with them and you pay attention to them, as whenever you cover a team that long, you can't really pull yourself away from there. I'll start with the big story with them. Is Micah Parsons on the field week 1?
I think he is on the field week 1. I would say there's like a 70% chance that he is on the field week 1 with a new contract. And I think
with a new contract, okay.
I think 70% with a new contract. I think I was about to go 25. Yeah, 25% that they play this out, tag him, and then figure it out, and 5% chance of trade. I don't think it's out of the question that they play this out. And I will say, the more that each side digs in, the more you say, well, the Cowboys are like, we're under contract, and Micah's party can be like, we're just going to keep making more money. But I don't really think that's actually in either side's best interest. The way that Dak, for example, when he was going through this, and he did play out a franchise tag year, believed that it was in his best interest.
Easier for a quarterback to do that than the defensive end, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting, going back to that distinction, when I talked to Dak at Cowboys training camp this year, and I was like, Dak, why are you supporting Mike and not practicing when you practice through this? And he's like, yes, but I'm a quarterback. I wear a red jersey. I'm not getting hit.
Great point.
Business, you can't go out there and do that. And Dak has been very open about supporting what Micah does. So I think that when it comes down to it, currently, to me, the number one reason Micah doesn't have a contract is because Jerry Jones is not happy with the fact that they had a handshake agreement that Micah's not keeping, which, oh, by the way, in case everyone hasn't been watching, the agent was not involved with this handshake agreement, nor did they have anything in writing. And I love Jerry. He's fantastic for our jobs, and he's so helpful for all of my interviews. So I say that, but I think when you look at it, at some point, I think Jerry's going to be, Jerry always says he doesn't have time to have a bad time. He's getting up there in age, he's in his 80s. I don't think he's really going to want to risk that with Micah for the sake of being stubborn.
I mean, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but the way I look at it, if Jerry Jones is willing to just pick up the phone and call the agent, I feel like they'll get the deal done. But if he's just going to be stubborn about it, that's how you get to the whole franchise tag thing, which, again, the Cowboys have gone down that road before.
Yeah, I think to me the most jarring moment of this whole conversation was I was at Denver Broncos practice, and all of a sudden Micah Parsons put out a 3-page statement saying he wants to be traded for the Cowboys. And I know that people say they want to be traded. I know that Myles Garrett said that. I know that Terry McLaurin and the Commanders had said that, and they don't have a deal as of the time we're recording this podcast. No one does this in Dallas. Again, I've been covering this league for 10 years. Not one person has asked for the Cowboys to trade them away.
Lamb didn't do it. Dak didn't do it.
Correct. That's just not what they did. They had other. I mean, again, I was there when Zeke was holding out 40 days in Cabo San Lucas.
Right.
There have been a DeMarcus Lawrence. I was there when he would not get his shoulder surgery until they gave him a contract. So I'm not saying no one had tactics, but no one's going to use this one. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, is Jerry going to just draw a hard line of if you don't want to play here, I don't want you here, because if that's how he believes in the brand. And then I'm there a few days later and Mike is on the sideline and he's talking to this player here, and okay, maybe he's not talking to Jerry, but he's talking to Will McClay, their VP of player personnel, and during the individual drills he's talking to defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus. So I don't think this is quite as broken as we're making it out.
Yeah, when he showed up to practice the day after he put the statement out, I'm like, all right, maybe he really doesn't want to get traded that badly. It's just kind of a negotiation thing. What do the Cowboys have to do to challenge the Eagles? They've been kind of the two teams that have gone back and forth, right, over the past 5-6 years. Do you think they have the ability to make a run and get back closer to that kind of 11-12 and Mike McCarthy era type of team?
Yeah, I would say the two biggest question marks for me are your defense. If you don't have Micah Parsons, the defense is significantly worse without Micah Parsons. And is your run game at least average? I don't think you need a great run game. You have CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens catching the ball from Dak Prescott. Especially if the offensive line is fine, they should be okay. But you need something of a run game for guys to respect, again, as we were talking about with Russ and the Moonball, so that you can get those guys open. Now, I do think that if I'm playing fantasy, which I'm not, you want that third receiver on your team, because George Pickens and CeeDee Lambs are covered. Well, Jalen Tolbert should be getting a lot of targets. So I think that there are going to be some surprise players because of the attention that those two receivers will be commanding.
Yeah, Kevontae Turpin, the other guy that does a lot of damage in the slot. I think a lot of that's going to do with their young offensive line, right?
Right.
They've turned that whole group over. No more Zach Martin, no more Tyron Smith. Travis Frederick retired a while ago. It's all new guys and a lot of first-round, second-round picks and still on their rookie contracts. Do you think that line has the potential to come together and kind of become the core of this group, like we've seen Cowboy offensive lines do so in the past?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, which is that when the Cowboys offensive line has been good the last decade and a half, the team has been really good and made it to the playoffs. When they've struggled on the offensive line, that's pretty much been like complete correlation with how they've done in the regular season and ultimately making it to the postseason, if not advancing super far into the postseason. So I would say I think we have to give the Cowboys some credit for being able to draft offensive linemen, because these guys we're talking about are all homegrown, and they've continued to take first-round offensive linemen again recently, which I think is a good investment. So I think they can do it, but it might take a little while. The beginning of the season is usually pretty rough for offensive linemen.
If you want to know how to manage 2 minutes of crunch time football, I'm your man. But if you're wondering about a long-term financial plan, you should talk to Citizens. Hey, I can also talk lawn care.
I'd like to learn about a mowing routine.
Yes, I knew I could help. Make sense of your money with Citizens.
All right, let's stick in the NFC. Any teams that you think people in the general public might be sleeping on that you think might be better than they're being given credit for?
I don't think we're sleeping on the Rams, but if we think the Rams are good, like, they could be great again. I think this
beat the Eagles last year,
exactly.
Right?
I think that this is a team that I do think Matthew Stafford will be out there week one, perhaps limited in terms of how comfortable he is. I don't think he's going to be limited in terms of his game, but I do think that, like, I talked to their general manager Les Snead about having Devontae Adams in the building, and I talked to Puka Nacua about learning from Devontae, and no one's doubting what Cooper Kupp did. He was obviously incredible for that team and a big reason they won a Super Bowl, but I think that when you look at what Devontae's doing, it's kind of like a new perspective when so many other guys had been, here's what Sean McVay taught me and here's what I've been doing my entire career. And so I think having Devontae and Puka, and oh, by the way, you still have Kyron Williams. And when I was at the Cowboys-Rams joint practice, the Rams were significantly stronger on both sides of the line of scrimmage than the Cowboys. And I think that that is in large part because of how well they've drafted lately.
Yeah, the Rams have a very good young defensive line. And a lot of those guys could end up breaking out this year for sure. How about the 49ers? Do you think they might have a big resurgent year? It's funny, they have these years every now and then where they just get a lot of injuries and they're bad. Of course, then they get to like draft Nick Bosa and it turns out they end up being really good again. Do you think this could be a big bounce back year for San Francisco?
I think it could. I think they still have the talent. But as you mentioned, I think that it's fair to question their health. And, okay, they don't have Deebo Samuel anymore. Okay, you've got guys who have been having some lingering injury issues.
Trent Williams is old, right?
Yeah, they've lost some guys. Charvarius Ward isn't there anymore. So I think that there are a lot of question marks there. I think that their floor should always be pretty high in terms of what Kyle Shanahan can do,
of course.
Brock Purdy, et cetera. But I do think that they have some question marks.
Yeah, and look, never bet against Kyle Shanahan. Another team, by the way, on the Giants' schedule this year, because somehow they finished in last place like the Giants, so they have to face each other. Is there a team in the AFC that does not have one of the big four quarterbacks, and that's obviously Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, that you think can challenge one of those teams to get to the Super Bowl?
Sean Payton is very high on his Broncos team. I think when you see what he did with Bo Nix last year, he believes he's got that guy. They might be the best defense in the league this year. I mean, I think that they have that talent and they've got the defensive player of the year. And so I think when you see what Bo Nix does year 2, if he builds on it, I do think that the Broncos, despite coming from a really tough division, I think the Chiefs will win that division, but I'm not sure. I think the Broncos could challenge them for the division. And if you got home field advantage in Denver, I mean, I don't think that's out of the question.
No, I don't think it is either. And the Broncos also maybe have the best offensive line in the league, too. So if you can combine those two things, a great offensive line and a really good defense.
Great play caller.
And a great play caller, that is not a bad formula. Here's an interesting one. I'm throwing this on you, so feel free to think about it for a few seconds. What division do you think is most likely in the NFL to have 3 playoff teams come out of that division?
Teams.
Last year it was, I believe,
the NFC
North. AFC North, I think, did it too, right? Didn't they? Didn't the Steelers make it with the Ravens?
But
No, the Bengals did not. They were short.
NFC
It was the
North.
NFC North last year, right? I'm sorry.
I mean, I could see I think the AFC North. Yeah, I think the AFC North is it this year because, I mean, you'd have the Ravens, you'd have the Bengals, and the Steelers. I don't know that the Steelers will go all the way, but I do think with Aaron Rodgers, they should be a better team.
I agree with
League wisdom suggests that usually about 18 months after you have that tear, you're a little bit better. So I think the beginning of last year, he was kind of dealing with like, oh, the calf is a little bit hurt because of the Achilles from beforehand. I think he should be better. He's got DK Metcalf in-house, and I think that defense is good. I also will say that just the vibe around Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers felt very different to me than Aaron Rodgers and the Jets.
Oh, how so? I'm curious.
I think that with the Jets, and I don't mean this is not, but it's been a long time since they've had success, and I think they were really like, Aaron Rodgers is our savior, and we're going to have success, not to mention the injury that happened, and obviously who knows what would be different if he didn't get that injury season-ending 4 snaps into his Jets career. But on the Steelers end, I feel like the Steelers are like, you've been here before, but so have we as a franchise. And maybe not the last few years. Maybe we're not losing. We don't have losing seasons. Mike Tomlin famously, 18 years, no losing seasons.
It's like, this is Mike Tomlin's team, and you're coming into it. It's not Aaron Rodgers' team, right?
And I think that that Aaron respects Mike in a way that maybe he hasn't respected some of his coaches recently. And I'm not saying that in terms of necessarily how he directly handled it, but I think in terms of the approach. So I do think that they have a lot of potential, even in a difficult division. And I just think, to me, the biggest question with Aaron Rodgers is his mind is still one of the best, if not the best, at the position in the game. And his arm is still great. So just, to me, take out a little bit of the mobility, be a little more realistic about how much you can move around. And maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe he does have it back after that extra time from the injury, and then you should be able to do it.
And I'm curious, and I'll do my final question. As you look, and I think, by the way, they'll run the ball a lot more in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And they won't put as much on his shoulders because that's what the Steelers do. As you went around the league, what are maybe one trend on offense and one trend on defense that you think might be coming down the pike in the NFL from talking to some of these coordinators that you think teams might be leaning into on both sides of the ball a little bit?
Yeah, I would say one thing on offense is the Commanders did a whole lot of things that interest me, but I would say that what interests me most is I didn't realize how much they went no huddle last year. I mean, I believe it was 61.4% of time last year.
I didn't realize that either.
The Commanders went no huddle. That's more than double the next highest number. I think it was like 25% and more than 5 times the average. And look what it did for Jaden Daniels. And I think that's relevant for you guys here at the Giants because
when Dart plays, right?
Yeah, when you see what Jackson Dart can do, I think that the Cincinnati Bengals defender Cam Taylor-Britt famously was like, oh, Jaden Daniels, he's just running a college offense. It's simple. And I don't even think that he actually meant it as an insult as much as it was taken it that way, but I do think people kind of viewed it as a mockery, and it turned out that Cliff Kingsbury was actually just like, why don't I play to Jaden's strengths instead of just doing something the way the NFL has done? And I think that a lot of teams around the league are watching the Commanders' blueprint for developing Jaden and saying, hey, we should probably do something like this. So whether that's no huddle or whether that's some of these more college principles, I do think we'll see that. Defensively, that's a good question, but I have been just very intrigued by the way that Brian Flores has revolutionized what Minnesota has done.
That's a good answer.
I think when you look at it, they were basically a bottom 5 offense in a lot of categories before he got there, and 2 years in their top 5. And I would say we're already seeing some of the trends in terms of like the versatility of his players, like what he did in Minnesota with certain guys like Andrew Van Ginkel, and technically Fangio had done that with Andrew Van Ginkel. Well, now the Eagles are like, well, why don't we take a chance on Zach Bond and see if we can have our guy? And essentially this idea of being able to change the coverage without changing the personnel. And I think that defenses that can do that feel really, really strongly about how they're able to confuse offenses, because I had an offensive coordinator tell me about Brian Flores. Like, I'm just guessing against him because what they're showing me pre-snap, it could be true, it could be not. It could be what I saw on film from last week. It could have nothing to do with that.
Now, the schemes are different, but it reminds me a lot of when we had Wink Martindale here. And what he always said to us is that, look, generally speaking, in the NFL, the offense will dictate what the defense ends up doing, right? Wink was always like, that's not how I'm going to play. Yeah. I'm going to set my personnel and my formation on defense where I'm going to tell the offense, well, I'm not going to let you do these things because if you do, it's not going to work against what I'm putting out there. And I feel like that's what Flores does, except he's even less predictable, right? He uses 3 safeties. He's going, dropping 8 in coverage. Yeah. Sometimes he's blitzing 8. He's all over the place, and I do wonder how personnel-based that is, if that will work for all these different teams, and how that can filter out, because I do think that is kind of the next generation, right? How can defenses confuse and dictate offenses who've been trying to do that to defenses with motion? This is kind of like the other side of that, right?
Right. I think it's a great point, because to me, like, what Brian Flores is doing is threefold. Part of it is the aggressive play calling and scheming. Part of it is, well, you have to execute that. And the way that people are on the league telling me is like, they kind of feel like that defense has taken on Brian Flores' fiery, tough personality. And there's a sense of swagger that he's basically infusing in them. And then also the personnel. And Brian Flores, I do think, has been intentional about who they've gotten on that defense to fit that. So if you don't have the personnel and the scheme and just the general demeanor to do it, it really probably doesn't work.
Now, you mentioned Van Ginkel, Harrison Smith being a safety that's seen everything. Bynum, right? Another guy that's super. Josh Metellus was there, right? Another super. So I think you're right. I think it'll be really, really interesting. All right, tell the folks everything that you have going on, where they should go find your work, social media, whatever you want to promote. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. Yeah, Jori Epstein. So I am at Jori Epstein on Twitter, and my work is largely found on Yahoo Sports, co-host Inside Coverage, the podcast there, and I'm writing often on Yahoo Sports. So that's my account on Twitter, on Instagram, all the things. And it's great to be on with you, John.
No, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for doing it.
Happy to be here.
Jori Epstein on the Giants Huddle podcast, presented by Citizens, official bank of the Giants, from the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. Enjoy it, everybody. We'll see you next time.